Well, good evening. Thank you for coming. If you can hear my voice and can grab your refreshments there and finish those up and come on in here. My name's Jared Ritchie, and I wanted to make a quick case for why we do this in the middle of music camp. This is our 4th annual Bach Lectures here at Church of the Redeemer. And we started it. We have 260 plus music campers this week here on site. But moms and dads, we've got folks from 12 states coming in. And several years ago, we talked about, hey, what can we do for the parents who the students are here each summer for a week? What can mom and dad benefit from if they can't sing the music on the concert on Saturday? We said, let's do something. And John Hodges was our first and has been our consistent speaker for each of those previous 3 years and now this year. And this year, John said, Jared, they've already heard all my stuff. I said, no, they haven't. And I said, but what else would you want to do? And he said, I would love to do something live. And I said, that might be a possibility. And so tonight is his idea come to fruition. And Braden, if you wouldn't mind, our sound man, would you change to the slide that has our musicians on it? We are privileged to have local musicians. We don't have a program for you, but I do want to acknowledge these folks. I'll introduce them for you. Elizabeth Frazier will be our principal violin here. Mallory Sanchez is our flute 1. John Ray is flute 2. Our very own Samantha Parker is violin 1. Charles Gillian is violin 2. Rebecca Kitchell is viola for us this evening. Mark McCleary on cello. Dr. Charles Morgan is on double bass. And then Amanda Roberts is playing the harpsichord, the digital harpsichord. Yes, very good to have her back. And these musicians. So, it's going to be a fun evening. So I hope my thanks to Connie Merritt and especially Shannon Trissler and Jackie Peacock for the spread here of food. So we hope you'll enjoy the music and the lecture here and then fellowship out there. And then tomorrow night, we're not done with you yet. So John Hodges will be done with you after tonight, but Dr. Scott Annual will be back here tomorrow night. We'll talk about substitutionary, he's going to talk about the St. Matthew Passion. So same bat time, or same Bach time, same Bach channel, 7 p.m. in here. We will have another evening of lectures and then a Q&A with John Hodges and Scott Annual. So we hope it to be a good, profitable time for you. You are in for a real treat, and I'm going to shut up now and let you enjoy that. So without any further ado, John Mason Hodges, the Center for Western Studies, is an orchestral conductor. He studied at Indiana U in his master's in orchestral conducting, and most of you know him as the head of the Center for Western Studies, a gap year program in Memphis, Tennessee, where he works and teaches students to love the arts, love music, love painting, love great literature, love architecture, and then takes them, COVID, barring, of course, but takes them across the pond to see some of the best art and architecture there. So he runs that program, but this is in his DNA, the music and the conducting. And I'll tell you, John Hodges is a wonderful man, but he is a winsome musician. I was telling him the one thing I learned was the only thing two musicians can agree upon is the incompetence of a third, right? That's the big joke. But John Hodges is a winsome, articulate, and passionate musician who his head is not in the clouds. You should have seen these musicians rehearsing earlier. They're laughing. And so I'm trying to get him to come into our symphony orbit more and more. So hopefully there'll be an opportunity. We have Lyle Miller from the symphony here with us this evening. So would you welcome for me and with me John Mason Hodges and our Bach Brandenburg ensemble.
Folks, thank you very much. Jared, that's very kind of you to say all those lovely things. I pay him to do that. Every year I've come has been a joy. And every year I've come, I've wanted to answer a particular question, and that is, what exactly does music express? How does music speak to us? It's an art form, and all art forms are means of expression. But the only way I could do that was to talk about music and then play recorded examples, you see. And so this year, we've got the live thing. So I'm going to ask the players behind me to play through the Bach Brandenburg number 4. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about various things and use the Brandenburg as a set of examples to get across certain aspects of what it means for music to be expressive. Music is the least tangible of all the arts. You know, we think about a Christian view of reality is that reality is made up of visible things and invisible things, right? That is, God created the earth and people and so on, but he also created angels that are invisible. And he himself is invisible. He's not tangible that way, except in the incarnation. Well, if that's the case, if that's how reality is, and there's lots of debate in the world about that, right? Christians agree to that, but there are plenty of people in the world that think that there's nothing but the material and not the spiritual or the invisible part. But we know that they're both parts. Well, the arts then, in a nutshell, are the bridge, in a sense, between those two elements, between the visible things and the invisible things. It's possible to use architecture or painting or sculpture or literature or music to mold material things in a way to represent or to reflect those things that are invisible. And that's what I think music is so great about, because music is the least tangible of all of the arts. When you hear music, you hear the architecture that it is, you hear the melodies and the harmonies and so on. But when they stop playing, when they lift the bow off the string, the music stops, doesn't it? And when it stops, there's nothing left. There's nothing there. There's no painting to grab a hold of or sculpture to put your hands on or something. It's completely ethereal. And because of that, it's one of the best ways, I think, to express some of these things that are invisible. But music is, in a sense, very like a lot of the other arts, in that music can build things like architecture builds things. So you have repetitions and architectural forms that music offers that give your mind a picture in your mind, in your imagination, of architecture. You can build like architecture. You can paint with sound in music like painters who paint pictures. So you can paint a story. You can paint a scene with music. A lot of film music is like that, isn't it? You can express in time. Music is not a static thing. It unfolds as it goes, like a play does, or like a movie does. It goes through time that way. So it has that element too. It can be molded. The sound can be molded into shape like clay, or carved into shape like a bit of stone in sculpture. Music has the ability to reflect shapes like that. And, of course, music can tell stories, constantly telling stories. Sometimes they're very abstract stories. Sometimes they're very specific. If you know some of the great tone poems by Richard Strauss, they're very specific. Till Eulenspiegel's Merry Pranks is a bunch of excerpts of this story, this person's life and what happens to him at the end. But in order to see, to understand, to comprehend, to apprehend what the music is saying, it requires that we learn something about the language of music. Music is a language just like English or French or Latin. It's a language, and it has a history and a kind of syntax and a kind of ordering, paragraph building, and so on as it moves forward. So you have to learn something about the language of music, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Now, there are plenty of philosophers that will tell you that music reflects the cosmos itself, the order of the cosmos. And if we had time, I have a whole lecture on just how it is that physical music reflects the way it is that God built the world to vibrate. The vibrations in the world, the natural vibrations in the world actually can be harnessed and can be crafted into various scales and modes and so on that we use in music. And so it's really rooted in the creation, not just in our own imaginations. But so what is this language of music, though? Well, there are 6 elements in music that I want to run through quickly, just so that you have them in your mind, so that I can maybe unpack a few of those as we look at the examples in the piece of music. Now, those 6 elements are these: rhythm, melody, harmony, form, timbre, and texture. Let me see if I can give you a quick definition for each of those. Rhythm is the organization of pulses into strong and weak beats that give you patterns. You know, if you take your pulse like this, you feel your pulse going thump, 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 thump. Well, a little faster than that for me since I'm up here. But it's thumping, right? And all the beats are the same. Boom, 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 unless you're, not healthy or something. But if you were to put your hand in your heart, you would feel something that goes dumpum, 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 dumpum. There's a strong and a weak beat in there. And so the medical profession talks about the pulse as different from the rhythm of the heart. And that's what rhythm is. Rhythm is taking strong and weak beats and putting them together in some kind of pattern. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, like that. Like the beginning of the first movement. Da da dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da da. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And you get a strong, weak, weak, strong, weak, weak beat. You can have it in 4s and 5s and 7s and so on, as those of you who are singing the Bernstein know. Bum bum ba-da, bum bum ba-da, bum bum ba-da. By the way, I hope you can come Saturday morning and hear them, because I heard a little of the rehearsal today, and it was wonderful, really wonderful. That piece means a great deal to me. I love that work, and I'm glad they're doing it. So rhythm is like that. Well, melody is the linear aspect of music, as one pitch after another, so you hear it in time. Harmony, on the other hand, is the vertical aspect of music, what you hear at the same time, pitches that are played together. Form has to do with the sort of gestalt of the work, the big picture. There's an A section and a contrasting B section, and then an A section again. And just like the first movement of our Bach, you hear an opening A section, a middle section that has a great deal of development going on in it, and then a return at the end of this A material and plays it to the end. So you get a sense of being at home and then going away from home and then coming back home again. That's just the way this form is. There are lots of other forms. But that's what form is all about. The shape or the repetitions and the patterns and so on in the music that give you a sense of the big picture. Timbre is a French word that means color. And we use timbre to describe the color of sounds in English, because the word color is usually visual, right? But we use timbre to describe the difference in sound, say, between a flute and a violin. They might play the same pitch, but they have different colors. And so the composer is using different colors while he's composing to bring out certain aspects of the music. And then finally, texture. And that's one of the things we're going to talk a lot about tonight. Bach is a great composer of texture. When we talk about texture, we're talking about a number of lines being played at the same time. Differing parts, but being played at the same time and having a kind of interaction with each other, you see. If we were all, for example, to sing row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, like that, all at the same time, it would be what they call monophonic texture. We'd all be singing, but it would only be one line, monophonic. But if this group over here starts, and then this group starts in the round a little later, and this group starts a little later, then you get what I'm talking about, polyphonic music, more than one line. Everybody's singing the same thing, but at different times. And because of that, it generates harmonies. Does that make sense? Well, what we're going to hear is Bach, especially in the last movement of this piece, here Bach doing what they call fuguing. He's writing a kind of a modified fugue, where he has one part play the tune, and then it breaks into an accompaniment when another part comes in, plays the same tune, and then a third, and then a fourth, and then a fifth, and it builds up this marvelous texture, polyphonic texture. So those are the 6 elements I want to try and talk about. The composers take those elements and they shape them, they move them, they change rhythm, they change timbre, they change the tempo of a melody, or the harmony, the harmonization of a melody, or all those things. So it's like an equation. A composition is an equation with about 6 different variables, and each variable has adjustments that you can make in it. So it becomes a very complicated thing, a composition. But a great composer like Bach is able to bring all those pieces together and make them make sense to you on a grand kind of scale, and in so doing touches on what Plato and Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas and many of the other philosophers said that music is so good at doing, and that is reflecting order. Reflecting order. It gives you a vision, momentary vision, of a kind of world that is ordered, that has rules, has structure to it. I'm a real fan, I don't know if you are, a real fan of the sort of murder mysteries. You ever watch murder mysteries? There are a whole lot of British murder mysteries. There was a great little series that came out just recently, three episode thing called Why Didn't They Ask Evans? Did anybody ever see that? Why Didn't They Ask Evans? It's worth seeing. If you haven't seen it, it's really fun. But the reason I'm interested in murder mysteries, I think, is for something that Dorothy Sayers said one time. You know Dorothy Sayers? Are you a Sayers fan? Sayers wrote a bunch of mysteries. She created a detective called Lord Peter Wimsey, and he's terrific. And she wrote a whole lot of novels with him, and they're all murder mysteries. Well, what she said was she thought that a murder mystery was a very Christian idea. Now, why would that be? I mean, murder is one of the big 10. You don't do that, right? You don't commit murder. No, it's not. It's not about the murder. It's about the truth. Because in a murder mystery, there's someone who has done this deed. And that story is hidden. But it's there, and you know from the beginning that somebody did it. And that truth is going to come out. And the logic that it takes to sift through evidence and to interview witnesses and to figure out timelines and all that stuff is a very Christian idea. That is, that there's a truth out there to discover, and that we can, by pursuing it, just like when God says, draw near to me and I will draw near to you, you know. In that same way, the detective is drawing nearer and nearer to something that's true, and you just know it's there. Nobody ever says at the end of a murder mystery, well, nobody knows who did it, and we're not even sure that it happened. And bye, you know. And that would be a very frustrating murder mystery. And it's because of this idea that it's describing a world, it's making a cosmos where there is a truth there to be known. And that's the way I think of most music, great music. Music has the ability to reflect something about the order of the universe, the order of the world. And when you come in contact with that, it's refreshing to your soul. It does something good for you. It's not just a matter of momentary entertainment. It's opening your eyes to a kind of craft in a way that that describes the world. It describes the universe that God has made. So I'm all in favor of seeing it as a much larger use in our world than simply momentary delight. It does that too, and I wouldn't want to take that away, but it's not for entertainment purposes only. Shakespeare is entertaining, but there's a lot more to it than that, and that's the same thing with great music. I'm afraid, I'll just give you my soapbox speech here, I'm a little bit afraid that in general, the evangelical church has given up the idea that there is anything worthwhile in music apart from just momentary entertainment or a chance to express yourself, sort of. And in the end, I think our standards have drooped, frankly. Now, I can say that here because I know Jared and I know what you guys are doing here, and it's astonishingly good. So I praise you for that. But you're rare. You're in the minority in our culture today. All you got to do is find out how many tickets are being sold for the typical symphony season, and you know that that's not high on people's list of priorities. And it should be. It should be, because all of these things are part and parcel of our cultural inheritance, and I think respecting our cultural inheritance is a way to fulfill the call of the fifth commandment. You know, the fifth commandment. What's the fifth commandment? Anybody know? Bingo. Honor your parents. Honor your father and mother. It's not just your biological father and mother. It's your musical father and mother, your cultural father and mother. The guy who built air conditioning. I'm grateful for that guy. You know what I mean? But there's a great, great Western tradition that is being lost if we don't pass it on. So that's part of what I'm interested in doing, to continue that love and that appreciation of the language of our own cultural inheritance in music in particular. One word about the Center for Western Studies. Thank you, Jared, for mentioning that. I run an organization that's called the Center for Western Studies. It's a gap year program that gives students an opportunity to come study with me and 5 of my other good buddies, faculty members. And we do 2 things. We teach a Christian view of the world, and we teach the history of Western ideas through the arts, music, and literature. And we have a spine of literary works that we go through that starts with Homer and works its way up to the 20th century. And with each of those time periods, we talk about music and about art and architecture as well. And in the spring, as he said, COVID notwithstanding, we have rent an apartment in Paris and one in London, and we take our students over there, and they get a chance to give reports on various works of art that they've studied during the year that they find at the Louvre or at the Orsay or the National Gallery in London or wherever we go. And so, if you're ever interested in that sort of thing, it's a small program. It's a tutorial program, so we only take a handful of students each year. But we are very proud to have many students from here the last couple of years, and we hope we'll continue to get people from Monroe coming. This coming fall, I think Amity Ely is going to be one of our students, and we're proud to have her. All right, just a word about Bach before we go into the music. Of course, many people, Christians and non-Christians, in the music world would consider Bach to be the greatest composer that ever lived. And frankly, even the best of us look up like this whenever we attempt to do what we're doing tonight, which is to interpret something written by this great master. He came from a long line of musicians. His parents and grandparents were composers and musicians, and many of his children were composers also. He had 22 children. Did you know that? He had 22 children. He had 5 with his first wife and 17 with his second wife. And many of them died, sadly, in childbirth, but many of them lived to become some of the great composers of the latter part of the 18th century. They all have initials. We talk about Johann Sebastian Bach, and the reason that people call him J.S. Bach all the time is because you have to distinguish him from his children mostly. He's got Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, K.P.E. Bach, and Johann Christian Bach, and Wilhelm Friedemann Bach. All these guys were composers, and so W.F. Bach and K.P.E. Bach and J.C. Bach and all those others are Bach composers as well. But you have to see J.S. Bach in a kind of lofty position. In fact, so lofty a position that really we mark the day, we end the Baroque period in our music history classes in 1750, which is the year that he died. He was such a big deal that when he died, all of it died with him. He was a bit of a dinosaur by the time he died. He lived 65 years, and in 1750, the musical styles of the day had gone past him. They were his own sons even were writing in what they call the Rococo style, and he encouraged it. He was not against it, but that he was sort of the old-fashioned, old fuddy-duddy kind of guy, writing in the old-fashioned ways. Well, that year, 1750, is a fascinating year in a lot of different ways. One of the ways is in terms of patronage. If you go before 1750 and ask yourself who were the famous composers in the 200 or 300 years before that, you get the greats like William Byrd and Palestrina and Vivaldi and Telemann and Corelli and Handel and all those guys. And all of them, except for Handel, all of them were associated with the church. Vivaldi was a priest. These guys were composing for the church. If you think about the great musicians that come after 1750, think about Haydn and Mozart and Beethoven and Schubert and so on, all those guys. All of them were not associated with the church. Now, I'm not saying they weren't Christians. Some of them were. Haydn was certainly a believer. But he wasn't patronized by the church. The church didn't pay him to do his music. It was the state. And so what you see right around 1750, and especially between 1750 and 1789, when the French Revolution happened, is a shift from what we call the pre-modern world to the modern world, to the Enlightenment. And in the pre-modern world, the main patrons were the church. So if you wanted to write music at the highest levels, you were working for the church, like Bach, like Vivaldi, like Telemann, like Corelli, like Handel's a bit of an outlier. My old history teacher used to say, Handel, he was a little German fellow, Handel was a German composer who wrote Italian operas in England. He was a real cosmopolitan kind of guy. But he was a believer. Now, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't working for the church exactly. He was working for a lot of other people. But he's an outlier. Most of the others are. And but what you find is, after 1750, the state takes over. Well, just before that, actually. But by 1750, the great composers are being patronized by the Duke of Esterházy, like Haydn. Mozart wrote for quite a number of different princes and dukes and things. And then by the time the French Revolution occurs, 1789, the aristocracy is kaput in France, and the others were sort of heading for the hills in some ways. And so the change went from patronage by the state to patronage by the people. And Beethoven was really the first composer who wrote music and then sent it to the publisher, and the publisher sold it to the people. He made his living from that. And so things changed rather drastically within that period of the 18th century. The first one probably to have that kind of grasp, that statesman have that kind of grasp over the arts was Louis XIV, Louis the 14th. of France, King Louis of France. They called him le roi du soleil, the sun king. He's the fellow who built Versailles Palace. Do you know Versailles? Yeah. Well, he is the fellow who who basically established what they call the how did he put it? Absolutism. Absolutism. He, from his throne room in Versailles, ruled everything. He ruled everything. He took over the art world. He took over the music world. He's the one who established what opera was going to be like and ballet and all these things. And everybody had to do their work in line with Louis's descriptions, definitions. And by 1715, he died. But he had established the idea that the state was now going to be the big patron of the arts. And most of Baroque music after the church there, certainly in the early part of the 1700s, and by 1750, we're making this transition to in patronage. Anyway, that's kind of what was going on historically at this time. And Bach was of the old school. Bach was of the church. And Bach is the opposite in many ways of Handel. Bach never left his world of Germany, his country of Germany. He traveled a little bit here and there, but very rarely. But he was able to get scores for French music, for Italian music, for English music, and he knew all of the contemporary German composers, the Buxtehudes and the Heinrich Schutzes and all those guys, but he also knew all the music that came before them. He was just voraciously eating of music, and he absorbed all of it and reproduced it in his own way and outdid them all. He took the greats. He knew Dufay and Josquin, people like that from the 15th century, and Palestrina at the end of this 16th century, and he knew all of these guys, and he then absorbed all of that and the new Protestant music, that was going on from 1517 onward. That's when the Protestant Reformation started. And all of that became part and parcel of his own musical abilities. And then he would turn out better French overtures, better Italian concertos, better keyboard works, better choral works. He just outdid them all. And then when he died, nobody knew who he was. He was old style. He was old school. And by the time he died, nobody was playing his music anymore. And all of his music got shelved. In fact, some of it got so lost that the story goes that his widow went to the fishmonger one day and bought a piece of a fish, and brought it home and unwrapped it and realized they were wrapping the fish in old manuscripts of Bach's music. That's how many pages he wrote. They were just everywhere. He would write an entire cantata, play it once, and then it would disappear. We've lost probably 2 years' worth of his cantatas. We think he wrote maybe 5 continuous years of every Sunday a cantata, and I don't think we have even 3 maybe now, something like that, 200 and some. You all know the number for that? No, it's two something. Scott might know. Anyway, so that was the problem. When he died, nobody was playing his music anymore. It was like, I don't know what it would be like. Maybe we still listen to Elvis Presley, I guess. But, it would be like the big guys in the 2000 teens and saying, well, we're going to go back and play Elvis, Nah, it's old hat. We know all that, But Felix Mendelssohn, the composer, early part of the 19th century, discovered some of his music and thought so highly of it that he said, this needs to be played. And as soon as he started playing Bach's music again, it erupted into popularity, and it's never died off since. So for about 100 years, maybe say 75 years anyway, his music was fairly unknown. It's hard to imagine that now, with so much Bach being played all around the world. Well, let's talk a little bit about how it is that he constructs this piece of music. First of all, what's a concerto grosso? That's what we're going to look at today. A concerto. Concerto is the Italian word for together, doing something together, in concert. We still say that. We're in concert with each other about that, kind of an archaic term. Well, a concerto is a piece of music for a soloist accompanied by the orchestra. They play together. The soloist and the orchestra play together. Fine. But this is called a concerto grosso. Why grosso? We think of that word grosso as a kind of ugly word, right? Oh, he's gross. No, that's not what it means. Well, it might mean that, actually. What it means is large. And in this case, the soloist is not one person, but three. There's a group of soloists, in other words. So Bach has written a piece. This is one of 6 Brandenburg Concerto Grossi that are for multiple soloists. So tonight we've got a virtuoso violinist soloist and 2 virtuoso flute soloists, and they play as the grosso part, and the orchestra plays as the tutti, or the rest of the ensemble, and they go back and forth and back and forth. So that's what a concerto grosso part is. How does this piece work? How is it that the building blocks of this music occur? If you've never heard any Bach before, it's often very impenetrable because there's so many things going on at the same time. So what I'd like to do is to take them apart a little bit, play you some examples separately, and then put them back together, and maybe you can still hear those interacting parts. So in the first movement, we have 3 movements, by the way. A concerto has 3 movements. This kind of concerto is a fast movement, a slow movement, and then a fast movement. And that's what we've got. So we'll go through those 3. In the first movement, there are some wonderful themes. He gives you a theme to begin with, and then he changes the key of that theme, plays it again in another key, and then in the middle section of the work, he goes through several different keys, in fact, relative minor keys to the G major that we're going to hear. And so that theme will come back and again and again and again in different sort of guises, different masks throughout the piece. And then you'll get this sort of recapitulation, they call it, where it comes back, the original material comes back in the original key, and you feel like you've come home again. So let me play you a couple of the themes to be listening for. There are 2 in particular that I want to show you. The first one is at the very beginning of the piece. So can we play just the very beginning without the flutes, okay? Just the rest of the group. Ready? It. Pretty cool, huh? But then he adds a little added twist, and he puts these 2 flutes in there. So you hear the melody that they just played, da, dee, dee, but at the same time, he's going to give you these flutes that are playing these arpeggios of the chords that the orchestra played in one note. Can we just do the flute parts by themselves? Listen to this. And... So you have those 2 things going on at the same time. The chord that the string players played, the G major chord, is outlined by the flute, and then the D major chord on the next bar is outlined by the flute, and so on. Let's play it all together. Yep. That's the opening number. Now, let me jump ahead to where they play it in another key. This would be after letter A. Right, letter A. Listen to this. It's different key. Could you tell that it was in two different keys? The first one was higher than the second one. Now, he connects those two statements up with this material. So you can go back now to bar 13. Can we start at bar 13, everybody? Got it? Do you hear all that? Now, what on earth is that? It's not a melody exactly, is it? It's what they call a sequence. We have a melody, and then we have a sequence, and then we play the melody again, and you'll find other sequences as they go along. But let me explain what a sequence is. It's taking a little bit of material, musical material, and then playing it up a step, and then up a step, and then up a step like that. Or the reverse, if you can ascending or descending. Listen to it again at 13. See if you can hear the same material repeated over and over again at different levels as it moves. 13, and. Up. Up. Can you hear it? Then we're in the new key, you see. So it's a way not only to keep the energy going, but it's a way to transition from the first statement in the tonic, in G, to the second statement, which is in D. Now, there's a second theme that he brings up. Let's see if we can find that. It's the flutes play it first, right? Bar 35. 35. Let me just get the flutes to play it. Would you mind? This is the second theme. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Do you hear that? Da da dee da da dee da 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 dee da 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 da. You'll hear that coming back time and again. The violins play it at one time. Even the cellos play it, I think, at one time. So that's the second theme. So you've got now three different elements. You've got the original theme, you've got the transitional sequence, and you've got the secondary theme. And then there's a third thing in here that I think is kind of cool, and I hadn't really paid attention to it until I did this, prepared for this concert. But it's got a little melody that comes late in the piece at letter E. Comes late in the piece, and it seems when it comes out that it's a brand new theme, like a third theme, which would be kind of unusual. Usually these pieces have a main theme and a secondary theme, and the two of them are worked out in the development section, the middle section of the piece. But there's this wonderful little tune, and I want you to hear it, and then I'll try and explain, I think, where he got it. This is letter E. Can we do just the flutes again? Huh? 1, 2, go. Get the idea. What on earth is that? A little echo going on. Where did that come from? Well, could be a third theme, but then it dawned on me. The second theme goes like this. Da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 da. That little bit, just the last little bit of that second theme, ba 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 ba, is similar, almost almost exactly what this is. Dee da 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 dee da, almost just a little variation. But I think he was taking that little bit of material and weaving it into the whole work. So you get a kind of, remember what I talked about being ordered? There's this order to it all, not only harmonically and rhythmically and so on, but there's this recurring motive, recurring bits and pieces of music, melody, I mean, that come back and hold it together. You play them, and then you wander off, and then you come back and play them again, and you wander off this way. And then you wander through a few key changes and some sequences, and then you suddenly hear them again. And then he starts taking them and pitting them against each other, and so on. So the piece of music actually has several small ideas, musical ideas, that then get treated. They call it treating a piece of a motive or a melody. That's what's going on here. Now, could I go back to the second theme again, would you? And where did I say that was? Da 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 dee da 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 dee. How about letter D? You could do it there. Just the flutes again. Gee, this is all about flutes. Aren't they wonderful? Don't they sound great? Let's try it. Letter D. Just us, huh? 1, 2, 3. Good. Now, do you hear how it's articulated? One of the great things about Bach's music is that it allows for a wide range of articulation and interpretation of the various phrases. Elizabeth and I spent a lot of time this afternoon talking about how to shape phrases in it. And she's doing such a wonderful job with it. The music can be shaped and molded, like I was talking about with like clay. Could you play one? I know you've learned it the other way, but can you play it straight without any of the slurs? Da 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 dee da 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 da, like that. 1, 2, 3, 1. Good. Hear how that is? Now let's play it with the articulation. And 2, 3, 1. Yeah, good. You hear the difference? Having them slur da da dee da 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 like that instead of da dee da da da. It's a little different, isn't it? Why? Hodges, what are you thinking? Well, there's a reason. Look at the very beginning of the second movement. This is the way Bach wrote the articulations in. He didn't put any articulations in what I just played for you. But in the second movement, he does put slurs in there, so you hear this. Can we start at the beginning? Everybody. Did you hear that? Ti, di, dia, da, dia. It's two notes slurred. It's not da, di, da, di, di, da, da, right? Well, he wrote it that way. Di, 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 da. So when I heard that same kind of motive in the first movement, da, da, di, da, 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 I thought we should slur those. You see? That's why. That's the kind of thought that goes into what he's trying to accomplish. What is he trying to do? And how can I bring out, as the interpreter, how can I bring out the life of his melodies and so on the best way possible? While we're talking about the second movement, he describes the flute parts. The original flute parts for this are played on the recorder. You know what the recorder looks like, right? Well, we have two marvelous flute players here. They're playing modern instruments. But still, he wrote in the part describing these two instruments this word in Italian, flauti d'eco, which is echo flutes, flutes of echo. And I thought, what on earth is he trying to do? Well, it turns out that the piece has, for the flutes mainly, an echo part. So let's play the beginning of the first movement one more time. Oh, second movement, sorry. Second movement, excuse me. Sorry, my fault. Yes, second movement, beginning. Now the echo. Now. You hear it? That's the echo part. So, I have a little wrinkle I'm going to throw at our flute players. I'm going to ask them when we play it for the actual performance, I'm going to ask them to go stand over there in the corner, away from the rest of the orchestra, so that echo is more pronounced. You hear it off in the distance. That's what's going on. Now, look at the third movement for a minute. This is a fugue of sorts. And the fugue has a melody that goes like this. Dom, dee, da, da, dee, da, 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 dom, bim, bum, 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 bum. And that's pretty much it. Except then it continues on underneath another statement of the theme. So let's play the very beginning, shall we? See if you can hear the viola, and then the second violin, and then the first violins, and then the cellos, and then finally the flutes. All of them playing that same melody at different times. Yeah, everybody. Yep. 1 and 2. Could you hear all of those? Isn't that marvelous? It's really marvelous. I'm going to play for you just a section of the development section. That was the simple part. That was the easy part in 5 or 6 parts of a fugue like that. Let me show you what he does in the very middle of the part of the piece. Let's start with. Can we go before T? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bars before T. This would be 126. See if you can still hear those themes in there in different keys and modulations and sequences and all of that. If we have to take it apart, I will. Let's see. Ready? Yep. 1 and 2. That's what's going on in the middle. It takes you through several different keys, various interesting modulations, accents, accidentals, a lot of new pitches and so on added in to change key, and then finally he brings you back to the end. At the very end, after you've heard the theme again, at the end, the beginning of it again, over again at the end, because he brings it all back, he has what we call a coda. And I thought this is a good 4, 6 bars or so to take apart so that you can hear how he jigsaws all these things together. So let's look at letter W. This is at the very end of the piece. When you hear this starting, you know you're at the end or close to it. Let's do, I tell you what, let's do the flutes by themselves and then the upper strings by themselves and then, let's see. Yeah, I guess that's it. And the solo violin. I'll do that last. Let's do the 2 flutes first, okay? Ready? 1 and 2. Just that simple. Just that simple. Do it one more time, will you? 1 and 2 and ba, do, do, do. That's it. That's right. Now, in addition to that, he has this going on. Let's have the first, second, and viola. Huh? 1 and 2. That's going on at the same time. And if you listen to it together, what you'll hear is when the flutes have a long note or a rest, the strings are moving, and when the strings have a long note or rest, the flutes are moving. And then it's tied all together by this wonderful violin part. You want to play it at W? 1 and 2. That's right. That's right. That's right. So altogether, those three things sound like this. Just the uppers. Huh? We'll leave you out for a moment. Yep. 1 and 2. See that? Now, what he does for you kindly is give you what they call a pedal point. So he gives you a long note for the basses here, the cello and the bass to hold, so that you get a sense of home. And on top of that sort of firm foundation, you get all this marvelous dichotomy of things. Let's hear it with the cello bass involved, all of us together then, huh? You want to play that? And 2. That's it. Isn't that wonderful? That's what Bach can do. It's order. It's possible. Have a seat, everybody. Thank you all. You did great. The wonderful thing about his music is that it's a combination of architecture, this kind of architecture I've been showing you, all this structural order that's very mathematical, very organized, and so on. And at the same time, it has the ability to be joyous, to be delightful, emotionally satisfying. And I think that's why it is that he's so popular still, because he doesn't either speak to your head or your heart, he speaks to both together. And if I could just say a word about that, that is, I think, key to the understanding of the aesthetics of the time that he was writing and before. That is, the pre-modern world. Ever since the medieval period, you have this idea that the visible and the invisible are supposed to be synthesized together, to be brought together. The great cathedrals of the world were an attempt on the part of the abbot sujets of the world, the designers of these great cathedrals, to try and physically manifest something of the astonishing glory of God, which is invisible. Many of the things they did, we won't go into them all now, but many of the things the Gothic cathedral did was to try and make windows high enough so that they could get light into the building, for example. They thought of light as symbolizing the glory of God, and they wanted it in the building. They wanted to be able, because up until then, buildings were very dark inside, with candlelight and so on. Well, they had this idea that the world needed to be understood within that synthesized way. That is, the physical and the spiritual were supposed to come together. In the Enlightenment, in the 18th century, starting with maybe long before that in Descartes and some other philosophers, you have a kind of separation of the physical from the spiritual, and the spiritual is given second place, second-rate value and authority. And the physical becomes the most important thing. And that's kind of how we're living today in many ways. Still, we're sons and daughters of the Enlightenment in many ways. We trust science more than we trust theology. I'm talking about our general culture. We trust science more than we trust because science somehow talks about material things that are solid and can be tested and so on. But the medievals would have scoffed at that. They would have said, no. The material is only a part of the world. And we today need to regain an appreciation for how it is that those two things fit together. Bach, I think, is the last of the great pre-modern composers and still thinks in that way, that the music not only has to speak to us as sort of intellectual beings, but also as emotional beings, as physical beings and as spiritual beings. Let me make one last word before we play the concert, and that is about tempo. Tempo is essential for interpretation of any piece, and conductors are always fighting over what the tempo of a piece ought to be. So how do you go about deciding? Well, there's the metronome mark, right? You can write a tempo marking in and then put a metronome mark, and it gives you exactly, to the minute, to the beat, how many beats per second you want this music to go by. Well, when Bach wrote his music, there was no such thing as a metronome. Nobody had invented a metronome yet. And so we only have the tempo markings themselves, the words. They're always in Italian, words like lento or adagio or allegro or presto or whatever that tell you something about how fast the composer wants you to play. Well, how do you go about deciding when the only word you have is allegro, which means simply fast? How fast? How do you decide what fast is? Well, here I want to show you where it is that music fits in with the physical nature of our lives. We judge characteristics like tempo based on things that we experience as physical beings, like walking. Like if I walked at my normal speed, like this, if I were walking to meet somebody and I just walked at my normal speed, that would be normal. If I got introduced to come and speak tonight and you saw me walk up to the podium at about that pace, you would think all is well. If you saw me walk up to the podium like this, I think you might wonder what's going on, right? That's unusual. That's not in the realm of normal for a walking person of my height. Or if I walked up to the podium like this. Something strange about this Hodges. Where did he get the idea that this is is it formal? Or worse, how about if I didn't walk in rhythm at all? What if I walked like this? Have you ever seen The Ministry of Silly Walks? Well, okay, so if we focus the tempo on the word allegro, meaning fast, then we have our walking speed that's normal, like this. Fast would have to be a little more than that, wouldn't it? Fast, if you want it to feel fast, it needs to have some urgency to it. You see? So it's all connected to the physical, the way we breathe, the way we what was I thinking about? Breathing. A heartbeat, your heartbeat, a natural heartbeat at 70 beats per minute is kind of normal. But if your heartbeat is running at 110, there's something desperate about it, something wrong, something active. Okay, well, if the word I've got is allegro, then I have to think, what is allegro? What is fast? If that's not fast, and this is fast, then I have to think, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. What could I do with this piece of music to make it feel like that? What element is in the music that would be at that speed? That's what I'm trying to figure. So, I could do it at, let's see, what did I say? 1, 2, 3, 1. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. That's a fast tempo, right? 1, 2, 3, 1, like that. Okay, 1, 2, dum, 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 dum. Well, if I did the dotted quarter note to that speed, it would be dum, 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 dum. It would be infinitely fast. There was no way I could do that. It's impossible. That couldn't be what he means. Okay, well, what about the 3/8 notes in the bar? Maybe that's it. So bum 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 da da dee da 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 dee da 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 da. That's where it falls. You see? So it makes sense. Okay. The slow movement is written andante. Now andante means walking tempo. That's what it means. Andare is Italian to walk, to move. And so I've got to be thinking more in terms of my original walk tempo, you see? So how would that be? That might be a little fast. Maybe that's okay. Well, that's good. What would be the next slower tempo marking? It's a word called adagio, which means slow. So if I made it adagio, it would be slower than walking tempo. Not much slower, but a little bit. So maybe now you could interpret the music that way if you wanted to, but it's not exactly what Bach wrote. If he wanted it to be slower than walking tempo, he wouldn't have put andante, he would have written adagio. So it's my job as the conductor to figure out how I can get that movement in it so that it doesn't slow down to sound like it's slower than walking tempo. I have to move it along. It has to feel like it's moving along, but not too fast. Now, the last movement he writes presto. Presto, and that means very fast. Well, if that's walking tempo and that's allegro, I've got to be a lot faster than that. So, it's going to have to move. It's going to have to really move if I want to make it work. Well, what element is there to do? I can do the half notes. How would it be? I can't even make it happen. It's impossible. Nobody could play it that fast. How about the whole bar? Bom, bom. So that would really be impossible. So maybe the quarter notes are the things that move at presto. So it's bum 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 bum. That would be fast, right? Deep deep dum 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 dum. See? Okay. Well then let's make the half notes then twice as long as those quarter notes, and you come up with what we just played. Dum dee da ga dee da ga dum. Dum bum bim bum 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 bim bum bum. That's the presto aspect of it. You see? So these interpretations are connected to your physicality. They're connected to your physical body. And it's amazing if you think about it, because God has created a world that allows human beings to relate to one another in words that we can understand, because he himself is the word that speaks to us. So he makes himself available to us through his word. He speaks to us in a language we understand, in other words. He could speak in infinite ways, right? But he chooses, in a sense, to condescend, that's the right word, to speak to us in a language that we can understand. And then we, as being made in his image, speak to each other in ways that we can understand. And so one of the languages we use is music. And music reflects the order of the cosmos and the physicality of our lives, but points all that physical stuff at things that are much larger than we are and invisible. So I hope that makes some sense. I want to take just a second and ask if there are any questions about what we've been talking about so far before we play the piece, and then we'll tune and then play. Anybody have a question? Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah. You want to know about the context in which the composition was written? Yeah. Bach wrote a lot of works for the church, but this isn't one of them. He wrote this as this and all the 6 concertos for in a sense, secular activity. This was to install the Margrave of Brandenburg. It was written for a kind of political, governmental event. But the marvelous thing is, a kind of support of the notion I gave you before, that he speaks about the spiritual and the physical together. He signed all of his music the same way. See, he saw no distinction between the works he wrote for the church and works that he wrote for secular political events like this. It was always SDG, Soli Deo Gloria, at the end of his works. To God alone be the glory. And I love that. And I think it's a mindset that we need to recapture in the church and in the creative world that the church should be encouraging to craft works that speak of the glory of God and the order of the creation. But it's not written for the church, so that's a good question. Any other questions? I know, you just want to hear them play, don't you? I do too. I can't wait. Okay, give us a second to tune, and then we'll play through the Bach Concerto number 4. Can we get your A for Elizabeth, maybe? Yep. Once more. Jared, I'll turn it over to you. Where is he? There he is.
Well, that was just marvelous, better than I thought it would be. So I hope you've enjoyed that. That just is our first night. I hope you'll take advantage of the time to step out into the foyer and visit. Saturday, as Mr. Hodges referred to, our music camp finishes up its week with Dr. David Erb conducting the Bernstein Chichester Psalms at 11 in this room with Dr. Rick Seiler, who's in the room with us tonight, who will play the organ. And I told him to knock all the dust out of all of the rafters on Saturday, so he assured me he's willing to do that. And then we'll have Marcy Hall on the harp. We'll have Dr. Mel Mobley from ULM on the percussion. But I thank you for coming tonight, and we have a dear friend of mine, Dr. Scott Annual, will come tomorrow night, as I mentioned, and give a talk. It won't be live. You guys don't have to come back and play the St. Matthew in excerpt or in the whole, so you are free and clear after tonight. But we will have a lecture tomorrow night and then a Q&A. So I hope you'll join us. We stream this on our website, and you can go back and watch it. I encourage you to do that. I want you just, if you wouldn't mind, giving one more rousing round of applause for our conductor and our ensemble. Thank you. So I hope you have a wonderful evening. We'll see those of you who can join us tomorrow night, same Bach time, same Bach channel. Enjoy the rest of the refreshments out there and visiting. Thank you. Have a good night. You're dismissed.